is a bonus episode of Away, a podcast for anyone interested in a secular approach to 12-step recovery. I'm your host, Steph Roberts. Hello, everyone. It is the evening of Wednesday, the 9th of January, 2019. And I have a really bad cold. So my normal tick of sniffing is going to be extra special annoying tonight. You're welcome. I started reading today a book by a woman named Ruby Warrington. The suggestion of a friend, I picked up a copy of Sober Curious. I have not even made my way through the first 15 pages, but I'm already really taken with it. I'm taken with her voice, but also her story. I immediately identified as an alcoholic because I still think that any normal drinker, even someone who is using it to get a little high, really doesn't have blackouts very frequently, at least, maybe one or two in a lifetime. And it struck me as my drinking was abnormal. I drank more than my peers, even in the party crowd. And at the end of my drinking, I fell in with partiers, all of whom I can safely diagnose as alcoholics and drug addicts at this point. They need more than a meeting or a book. Many of them need rehab. So I do identify myself as an alcoholic. And this book, I shouldn't say and. However, this book is for anyone, as far as I can tell. Whether or not you want to identify as an alcoholic, whether or not you're ready to identify as an alcoholic, whether you want to do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous because that feels right, or you don't and you're very uncomfortable with that idea. Just the beginning of the book I found really hopeful and inspiring. And I wanted to just read a couple of passages that I found particularly inspiring at the beginning of the book, with the hope that this would inspire you to go pick up a copy. If you're not a reader, it is available on Audible. And I think that Ruby narrates it herself, which I like particularly with this kind of literature. So in the preceding paragraph from the passage I'm about to read that struck me as incredibly important, Ruby is talking about these sort of typical or stereotypical aspects of a quote-unquote real alcoholic story, a stack of DUIs, chronic health problems, so on and so forth. And she says, none of which accurately describes the kind of drinking I was doing by the time I went to AA or have ever done. The alcohol problem I have since identified in myself was that booze was preventing me from being fully present in my life, by which I mean it was preventing me from knowing in each and every moment of each and every day what it really felt like to be me. A quote-unquote problem, since it's only from this place of knowing, of presence, that I can truly choose which decisions to make and which next actions to take in service of my own highest good. So she says far more articulately than I do, pretty much the same thing I've been saying as an atheist, is that by staying sober, you are clearing up the fog enough to find your moral compass, whatever that may look like. And in order to begin relying on yourself again as a good judge and making the right decisions and taking the next right actions and steps. Going forward, Ruby writes, I might have radically shifted my drinking habits, but the well-worn grooves of my cocktail girl persona ran deep. Which brings me to the conclusion I've arrived at as a result of my sober curiosity, that as humans, we're pretty much hardwired to get hooked on hooch. So, as you know from the discussion of the Atlantic article, if you listen to that episode, I think the answer to that is yes and no. We are certainly wired, and she discusses neural pathways further along in the book. We are certainly wired chemically to want more of what makes us feel good. Certain centers of the brain light up. Ruby actually, as a journalist and writer, describes this much better than I do. But studies have shown that alcohol is different, and that while it may become a habit for many people and seem almost necessary to them, the actual addiction to it differs. That perhaps means that alcohol does light up these pleasure centers to an extreme, but not for everybody. So for some people, it is extremely pleasurable, and they are the ones who probably cross the line over into alcoholism. Again, though, there does seem to be a difference in alcohol addiction and drug addiction that would lead me to believe that alcohol does have this effect and light up the brain centers in a radical way, but not for everybody, whereas anybody can get addicted to an opiate. There doesn't have to be a different addiction gene. You can addict any animal, including the human animal, to an opiate. It is that pleasurable, and your brain derives that much from it that it just immediately says more, no matter who you are. She goes on to write, if not suffering from the chronic progressive brain disease of alcoholism, as a garden variety habitual drinker, I knew what I had to do, which was to begin thinking of myself as a sober person, somebody who does not drink alcohol, period, while also embracing the possibility that this may or may not look like total lifelong abstinence for me. So what I like about this is a few things. A, this is very much the same idea as one day at a time. Because if you're really taking your sobriety one day at a time, your abstinence from alcohol one day at a time, then the trick is you're saying, I'm just not going to drink for today. That does not mean I won't drink tomorrow. That does not mean I won't drink forever. I'm just making that commitment to myself today. But that is sort of the core of AA, or what you'll hear any guru, any self-help person talking about, anyone who's achieved real success in anything. You have your primary goal of getting sober, but that is only achievable by setting small achievable goals along the way. So whether that's a day at a time or trying it for 30 days and sort of seeing how it goes and not making a decision that this is forever. Even if it feels like you're just tricking yourself, it really works to say, I'm just going to try this for now. What's the harm? And we've talked about that before in previous podcasts. Okay, she goes on to write, this may be a little confusing given the black and white approach of the AA 12-step model that we're taught is the quote-unquote cure for addiction. But increasingly, research shows shades of gray when it comes to addiction. Did this mean there could be shades of gray in sobriety too? This is essentially the philosophy that has formed the basis of my own sober curiosity, and that we'll unpack in more detail in this chapter. Which is not me trying to go ahead and answer the big question on your behalf. You may well have never even considered the words alcoholic and addiction in relation to your drinking. So one of my problems, as you probably know by now with the AA model, the 12-step model, is that it is too black and white, and that it doesn't allow for a secular approach always. It doesn't allow for a female approach. There is a stubbornness to many of the people in AA and within the principles of it itself, which as an atheist is sort of difficult to wrap my mind around because my doctrine is to question everything. And that doesn't always seem true for others in AA and 12-step programs. I do think we're seeing, even in AA, that more people are willing to embrace the fact that there are shades of gray, as Ruby puts it. And as I would say, that there are, even within the 12 steps, unique approaches and unique way through it. I think many, many people have been quietly doing this. I certainly am not unique in taking my female sponsees through the book and the steps in a slightly different way than is laid out in the book itself. And I am always asking people I work with and others to reframe things. I'm just now taking it to the next level, as are others, and saying it out loud, not just doing quiet work behind the scenes. We need to start saying it out loud to change that, to make it less black and white, and to embrace those shades of gray, and to say there isn't just one way. There are many ways, thus the point of this podcast. Further on, she says, the quote-unquote brain changes he's talking about are the new neural pathways that form when we repeat any experience that the brain likes, meaning an experience that either brings us pleasure or helps us to avoid pain. The deeper these neural pathways become, the more likely we are to unconsciously repeat the behaviors that led to them, meaning repeat them without question. There are also the brain changes that have led the medical establishment to label addiction a disease. So I love this. I'm so into the neural pathway idea, and I'm really into, as you know, sort of cognitive behavioral therapy to quote unquote correct those neural pathways. So I guess I phrase it the way I think of it is that we can rewrite them. So no matter how, I see people come into AA having been drinkers for 45 and 50 years. So that is an ingrained habit. And if you think for a minute that it is not harder for that person to get sober than it is for you with 10 years of drinking, you are wrong. Someone who has been dependent upon it, no matter the reason, whether it's actual physical dependence or habitual, every party always uses it to loosen up. Those established patterns are incredibly hard to change, and they get harder to change with every year. But they are changeable. And I know the scientific language will not say rewrite neural pathways or overwrite them. I use that language because I think it's a little less confusing. I think what actually happens, though, is when we begin to use new habits, to replace the old habits with new habits, the less attention or energy we give to those old habits, the less energy and attention the brain gives to them. So at some point, the brain's like, clearly I'm not going to get that anymore. Clearly I've got to find my pleasure elsewhere. This other thing is giving me pleasure. Let me give more energy and attention to this new thing. And slowly but surely, the old neural pathway disintegrates. Obviously not literally. And this is where I think alcoholics say the dreaded first drink if you pick it up. That neural pathway can clearly strengthen again. It's atrophied, but it's not gone. I don't know my feelings on one drink. I think I don't want one because I have no desire to feel tipsy or out of the present really ever again right now. It's not something I want for myself or the after effects, which I imagine at this point in my life would be dreadful even after one drink. But if I were to pick up a drink accidentally at a party, I don't in fact think that would reignite my disease and I wouldn't be able to stop. If I picked up the drink accidentally at a party, and then the next time I went to a party, I picked one up on purpose, I think that atrophied neural pathway would start to strengthen. This is based entirely on anecdotal experience and personal experience. There is some data to back it up, but on the whole, it's conjecture for me. So I'm going to stop there. I hope that I have inspired you to pick up a copy of this book, regardless of whether you're in AA or any 12-step program, especially if you know you want to stop drinking, you're confused on how to do it, you want to find a way to start. I'm a huge proponent of coming to AA, preferably finding a sponsor like me who is open-minded and willing to take different approaches. But that isn't always the case, and not every meeting has open-minded people in it. I mean, we are a microcosm of the real world. There are bad people with bad motives everywhere, including the rooms of AA. So if you are concerned or fearful or struggling or curious about what life could be like without alcohol, whether or not you have a problem, I really suggest picking up this book. Again, you can get it on Audible if you're not a reader. I happen to actually be a much better audio learner, but for the purposes of this podcast, I wanted to be able to read it and look at it. So I downloaded the Kindle version. It's all on Amazon. And I think it's yet another way to look at sobriety. It's yet another lens through which to view all this. I'm really excited to read the rest because Ruby Warrington is showing us that no matter what, there is a way.